Closer to the date, we have also seen the Supreme Court answering several questions on the Tata Group versus the SP Group, which I would call as a Cyrus Mystery affair. But I was personally struck by the very precise arguments which the Supreme Court laid out while answering these questions. Now, how do you think these observations of the court, be it in terms of minority shareholder rights, proportional representation on the board, shareholding valuation, shadow directorship, and role of the chairman, and ability of the boards to replace their chairman, have on future boardroom issues that emerge in the corporate sector?
Yeah, so the Cyrus Mistry case is one area that I have not focused on in my book, because when I was completing my book, the things were just opening up. There wasn't sufficient information and the matters were sub judice. And hence, I did not want to elaborate just on facts which are already known in the public domain. There was also a lot of sensitivity within the Tata Group leadership, and people were not openly mentioning things and sharing their opinions. And so I wasn't able to get a substantial insight in providing views across the table. I usually go for what is called triangulation in research. So you have your own first and primary interactions through interviews. You have the secondary data, which is published in newspapers, magazines, management case studies, etc. And the third, of course, is your opinion about it. I always go for triangulation. And because there was only one side of information available, which was in the press, and a lot of them were conjectures, I wasn't comfortable making an opinion based on what's available in the public domain. I also remember a conversation in this context with a professor at Harvard Business School whom I interacted with, and I would not like to name him. At that time, he had said that it would not be fair to go by conjectures and come to an opinion as to what were the causes or what happened in the boardroom or what could have happened or what were the intentions, and ascribe them to people, because we were not present in the boardroom when the decisions were taken. And hence, to comment on people's intentions without having access to the facts files wouldn't be a good authorship. And hence, that was a very conscious decision of leaving out the Cyrus Mistry case, because it was a developing scenario at that time. But now that the Supreme Court has ruled, has provided its ruling, has ruled in favor of Tata Sons and Mr. Ratan Tata, I think I'd like to say that they've been very clear and unequivocal in the way they have given the verdict. It's almost a 250-page verdict. And as you mentioned rightly, they've covered all issues which were highlighted over the years in several applications made by the opposing parties, issues connected with minority shareholder rights, issues connected with proportional representation on the board. With respect to minority shareholder rights, the Supreme Court, in fact, mentioned in their ruling that if you say that minority share rights have been trampled upon, how did the Tata Group actually make the minority shareholder into the chairman with just an 18% ownership of the group? How did they make you the chairman of the group? So that very clearly indicates that they were willing to give rights of management, or rather had actually made a minority shareholder the chairman of the group when they had only 18% of the stake. So the question of trampling over minority shareholder rights was misplaced, as mentioned by the Supreme Court. Proportional representation on the board, shareholding valuation, shadow directorship issue which they raised. Very often, Mr. Ratan Tata was claimed to be a shadow director and trying to influence the decisions made in the board by the SP Group. And the Supreme Court mentioned very clearly that was a question of calling Mr. Tata shadow director. Mr. Tata was not a shadow director. Mr. Tata was chairman emeritus, and he was nominated as chairman emeritus by the incumbent after taking over. So the right and the sagacious advice of the chairman emeritus and his opinions in the interest of the group that he's been part of and has helped in building for almost 2 decades are very much in order, and hence to call it shadow directorship would not be fair. And also they ruled in favor of Tata Sons and their right to appoint and remove a chairman with the right kind of majority and the proper procedures and practices that are not, required by law. In fact, even when my book was launched at the Tata Literature Festival, I had mentioned this particular aspect when I was asked. I didn't delve into many other aspects, but I did say that the Tata Sons board, which took the decision of replacing or removing the chairman, consists of very eminent people who are industry captains in their own light. The chairman of the Piramal Group, the chairman of TVS Motor, the dean of Harvard Business School. These were all very eminent people in the boardroom, and they would not be willing to compromise their reputation and stake their goodwill and brand just to support Mr. Ratan Tata's decision or intention of replacing the chairman, unless they were absolutely convinced that the decision to remove the chairman of Tata Sons was legal, was fulfilling the recommended processes, and was in the interest of the group and its companies. So many of the people have just ascribed it as a decision of Mr. Ratan Tata, but it wasn't a decision of Mr. Ratan Tata. It was a decision of the board, and all the board members had signed. One or two of them abstained, but those who signed put their opinions on record, and hence it was a collective decision. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the right of the board of Tata Sons to replace the chairman. In fact, they also ruled in favor of Tata Sons' freedom to go back to being a privately owned company and not a publicly owned company, because originally they were a privately owned company. And because the rule of law changed, they had to become a public limited company. And when the rule again changed and they had the flexibility to go back to becoming the privately held company, they opted for that. So all of these aspects are very clearly giving indications on what is it that the Supreme Court believes in as right. And I think it has a huge ramification on future decisions with respect to all of these issues, whether it's minority shareholders' rights, whether it is about the role of Chairman Emeritus. Chairman Emeritus can in a way be compared to someone like a Bhishma Pitama. Because we're talking about Katha and Mahabharata. He's the senior most member of the Hastinapur family. So while he's not the king, he's a kingmaker, and he's also the most experienced and sagacious individual in the kingdom. And so while the decision is taken by the king, the advice is always sought. And even if it is not sought, it was given when it was meant to be in the interests of the kingdom. So I think it's a similar role that a chairman emeritus plays and should be playing in the future. And that has been made very clear by the Supreme Court. I think also the issues of culture along with compliance have been highlighted by the Supreme Court indirectly. The fact that the issues with the chairman emeritus's role and his freedom to express his opinion and the kind of respect that should be given to such opinions when it is meant to be in the interest of the group and its companies is clearly an order supporting the role of culture, organizational culture, along with compliance. So not only were they complying with the processes, the due processes, but it was also in alignment with the culture that is expected of companies in a particular ecosystem, and in this case, the Tata conglomerate. The last point I'd like to cover is on, and of course, they mentioned the issue of how it is justified that Mr. Cyrus Mistry was removed from his directorship. And the court gave the example that, or rather gave the fact or shared the fact or highlighted the fact that when a particular director of a company for reasons of his or her ambitions not being satisfied decides to rock the boat or rather burn the boat by leaking information, by giving misleading information in the public domain that can affect the market valuation of the company or the future prospects of the company or kind of faith the shareholders and international partners and collaborators have in the company, is very clear that that person does not deserve to continue as a director on the board of that particular company. And in fact, when Mr. Mistry was replaced as the chairman, he was retained as the director. He was not removed as a director. He was removed as a director 2 months later when he indulged in a series of activities which were detrimental to the interests of the companies and its employees and several other stakeholders. That's when they decided to remove him from directorship. So when the minority shareholders do not act in the best interests of the company and are interested in their own interests being fulfilled and are willing to compromise the well-being of the company for that sake, they deserve to be removed, is what the verdict, the purport of the verdict given by the Supreme Court. The last part which I wanted to cover was on succession planning. If there is one place where the Supreme Court has indicted, quote unquote, the Tata Group, is with respect to its succession planning decision. They called the decision of appointing Mr. Cyrus Mistry as the chairman of Tata Sons as a very bad decision, which they had to pay very heavily in the form of this kind of crisis, boardroom crisis that emerged. So on the succession planning bit, I think there is a huge opportunity not only for the Tata Group, but for all conglomerates to think through very seriously. There was a similar experience, not similar actually, but there was a very controversial series of events that happened even when Mr. JRD Tata passed on the baton of the chairmanship to Mr. Ratan Tata, and there was a lot of objection. And the case of Mr. Rusi Modi and his displeasure over Mr. Ratan Tata becoming chairman is well known. So succession plannings in India have not been very smooth, even when it comes to people like JRD Tata, who received universal reverence, but yet were not able to have a smooth transition. We've seen examples with respect to succession planning, even in companies like Reliance, when Dhirubhai Ambani did not leave any clear succession plan in place. And there was a clear displeasure among the brothers who were automatically nominated as chairman and vice chairman, but both were ambitious. And we saw how the battle for succession and control over Reliance companies played out between the Ambani brothers in public and full media view. Similarly, we saw a strife in Infosys between the founders, especially Mr. Narayan Murthy and Mr. Vinay Sikka. And finally, Mr. Sikka had to move out. And eventually, Mr. Nandan Nilekani came back from the founding team as the chairman and replaced Mr. Seshasai and Mr. Ravi Venkatesan, who were jointly heading the board in 2017. And 4 years later, Mr. Nilekani continues to be the chairman of Infosys. When it was decided that over a period of time, the founding team will move out completely and it will be handed over to a professional team. But even there hasn't been total success with respect to succession planning. So there is a lot that needs to be studied with respect to succession planning as to why is it that it hasn't been smooth with iconic leaders like JRD or Ratan Tata, or very successful entrepreneurs like Dhirubhai Ambani, or greatly admired professionals like Mr. Narayan Murthy, who went on to build companies like Infosys. Cases, there has been a lack of sufficient success or a smooth transition with respect to senior leadership.
All right. Thank you, Shashank, for that those insights. In fact, I was personally, quite surprised when Mr. Cyrus Mistry was appointed as the chairman, because at that point of time, if you recall, Tata Sons had constituted a board, search committee kind of a thing, and a lot of names were doing the rounds. Specifically, I think Indira Nooyi was a top contender at that point of time. At least her name was doing the rounds in the media. And one was quite surprised on Cyrus Mistry being made the chairman. But then I also remember Mr. Ratan Tata had said at one point of time that as per his desire, he would perhaps like to see someone in his mid-40s as the chairman of Tata Sons in the near future. I think, and that perhaps, I think prompted the decision to some extent. Plus, of course, the fact that Cyrus had a greater degree of familiarity. I somehow also feel that perhaps he was not as much of an insider in Tata Sons. He was there for 6 years, but perhaps largely in the boardroom and not very well, let us say, ingrained into the Tata system. And second, I also think that the mentorship that he had to take over the role of the chairman was quite limited. It was limited to, I think, about 1.5 years or 2. And also perhaps that there was obviously a breakdown of communication as he got into the role of Tata Sons, Chairman Tata Sons, with his Chairman Emeritus. I was also shocked by the manner in which he was replaced. And I think The Economist also had written an article on this. But the Supreme Court ruling and the citing of their point of view and the clarity with which they have communicated their decision and the examples that they have mentioned, I think that should remove all the doubts that any of us had ever had on the wisdom of the board of Tata Sons on arriving at this decision.
Right. I'd just like to add one or two things there. I think a very important point to note is that, of course, to add to what you said, in fact, Mr. Mistry was a part of the selection committee for the next chairman, and eventually he became the chairman himself. So that also had raised a lot of eyebrows at that time. But the point I would like to highlight here is about two points, in fact. One point is on the brand aspect. Despite the entire controversy playing out in the open, 24/7 media, the international players looking at it very seriously, because by now Tata's were globalized, India's most globalized conglomerate. The Tata brand did not suffer. Back-to-back studies on the Tata brand has only led to a rise in its valuation, even at the thick of the controversy. Between 2016, 17, 18, Tata brand's valuation has been going up. And there has not been any direct impact, though a temporary blip in some of the share prices, but there has not been any major impact even in the shareholders' perception of the promise of each of the Tata companies. The second part which I'd like to highlight, which you alluded to, is about Mr. Mistry's presence within the Tata ecosystem and him becoming a chairman rather laterally. So while he was there in the board for over 6 years and more, and a vice chairman for a year, but he had not risen up the ranks. So in companies like Tata, in conglomerates like Tata's, which have a long heritage and which have a culture which has been nurtured over 150 years, for someone who is not risen up the ranks in that culture or has not spent substantial time looking at the nitty-gritties of how decisions are taken, leadership is developed, strategic thinking evolves, and how collective decision-making and multi-stakeholder value creation is a priority, a lateral entrant chairman may not be able to do justice or may not be able to learn some of these cultural nuances on the go. So that was a very big learning. In fact, many of the Tata leaders confided when I interviewed them that one of the major learnings for them was that to have a chairman from outside who has not been, who has not risen up the ranks or has not worked on the shop floor at Jamshedpur or at Tata Motors, or now for that matter on the treadmill of TCS, would not be able to understand the way Tatas take decisions or Tatas should be taking decisions. So these are also insights. It's not always the best idea to get lateral talent to head a conglomerate of this nature. There is a lot more cultural nuance to it, which is what has emerged in this particular case. And of course, issues connected with succession planning. I too was extremely surprised with the way Mr. Mistry was moved out. But I think sometimes they say that a tough decision or a bad decision or a sudden decision prevents the company from repeating bigger mistakes of that kind in the future. So I think this entire 3 or 4 years that were invested in several levels in the court, and in fact the appellate tribunal ruling out that if it were not for the Tatas, they would even have advised the shutting down of the companies, which was quite a scary ruling by the appellate tribunal, which even the Supreme Court referred to in their judgment, that they were appalled at the kind of comments that the appellate tribunal had made and had reinstated Mr. Mistry as the chairman when that was not even a request he had made in his plaint. So even at the legal level, the opinions that have come are quite divergent, but the Supreme Court has laid most of them to rest. At the cultural level, at the leadership development level, there are several insights for the Tatas. And at the brand level, there are very valuable insights. That because Mr. Ratan Tata had invested phenomenal amount of time in building an institutionally strong brand and not an individually strong brand. Remember, I had mentioned in one of the earlier episodes, the brand during JRD years was very closely related to his persona. And so when his persona was under a cloud, the brand suffered, if at all. In this case, Mr. Ratan Tata's persona being under cloud for whatever controversy emerged did not have a direct impact on the brand, because the Tata brand was not equal to Mr. Ratan Tata's personal brand. Over 20 years, the Tata brand had very strongly developed its own identity. And that is what he had envisioned, that irrespective of who is the leader, the brand should have an institutional centric identity. And that played a very phenomenal role in enabling the Tata brand to emerge unscathed. I think that's one of the greatest lessons that comes from this controversy, that institutional policies and processes play a very important role in such crisis situations and should be nurtured and nourished in the long-term interests of the group and all its stakeholders.
Yes, I agree, Shashank. And by that rationale, I think they have found the perfect fit in Chandra, who's an insider, has been there for a very long time. And more importantly, has been very instrumental in scaling up TCS and ensuring that TCS has got a presence around the globe. And at a time in the world when everyone is going digital and businesses are getting infused with technology, I think they could not have asked for a better leader. I remember when I was in Israel, I was extremely surprised to find a TCS office there as well. And everyone in the local cafes thought that I was working with TCS, and that is extremely credible. And his current mantra of simplify, synergize, and scale, I think these three things will stand the group in good stead in years to come. And with that, my dear friends and viewers, we come to an end to all these episodes of Tata Katha. I hope you have enjoyed being with us. A big thanks to Dr. Shashank Shah, a renowned author of the book, The Tata Group, which I would recommend everyone to please buy a copy and kindly read. The book is also an institution in itself, like the House of Tatas. A big thank you to Saurabh Sarkar from MDI Gurgaon, Avinash Pant from NITE for having conducted this session on Banyan Tree. Thank you so much, viewers, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Girish, for a very interactive conversation we've had over the last 5 episodes of Tata Katha. Thanks to the Banyan Tree team, Sauradeep, Avinash, and others in putting this fabulous 5-part series together. And thanks to the listeners for your time, for all your feedback, and for all your interest in the Tata Group. Just to conclude, my intention in writing this book was not just to write about the Tatas, but to write about the ideals, the ideas, the values, and their implementation that they've stood for over 150 years. And I think they validated the aspect that the ideal of trusteeship, which Mahatma Gandhi held very dear, owes its origin to the Isha Upanishad, the Indian scriptures, which says that we are all trustees of the wealth at our disposal, and we should use only that much as we need. And all the surplus should be used for the well-being of the society, the community, and the nation. Has been very well displayed in action by the Tata Group. And my intention was to show that this ideal of trusteeship is not only personally but institutionally possible to practice. And with that endeavor in mind, I have attempted to write this Tata Katha as a form of my book, The Tata Group, with the hope and prayer that it inspires a billion Indians to lead their professions with ability and nobility, and make great contributions to our dear country, just like the House of Tatas have done over the last 15 decades. Thank you very much, and look forward to interacting with you on several social media platforms where I'm active, especially LinkedIn, my channel on the YouTube, where I post a lot of short videos, and my website and my LinkedIn page. All of these are available in the description, and please do reach out to me. And thank you very much for your time. And let's make all the efforts that we can in making the India of our dreams, so that we leave behind a very satisfying legacy for ourselves and for our dear country. Thank you.